Tomorrow, the Supreme Court of India will deliver a landmark verdict that could potentially reshape the country's economic landscape and redefine the principles of wealth distribution. At the heart of this monumental case lies a fundamental question. Can the government legitimately redistribute private property to achieve social and economic justice for all its citizens? The case revolves around the interpretation of Article 39(b) of the Indian Constitution, a pivotal clause. This article falls under the directive principles of state policy, which, while not enforceable by any court, are fundamental in the governance of the country. It directs the state to ensure that the ownership and control of the material resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good, aiming for an equitable society. This case has ignited a fiery debate across the nation about the delicate balance between individual property rights and the greater good of society. On one side are those who staunchly believe that private property is sacrosanct and inviolable. They argue that any attempt to redistribute it amounts to an infringement on fundamental rights, a violation of personal liberty. On the other side are those who argue passionately that the government has a moral and ethical obligation to address economic inequality. They believe that redistributing resources is not just necessary, but crucial to uplift marginalized communities and bridge the economic divide. The court's decision will undoubtedly have far-reaching consequences, setting a precedent for future cases. It could empower the government to pursue ambitious social welfare programs aimed at reducing poverty and promoting social justice. Conversely, it could restrict the state's ability to intervene in the economy, thereby maintaining the status quo of property rights. All eyes are on the Supreme Court as the nation eagerly awaits a verdict that will not only shape India's future, but also reflect its values and priorities in the realm of economic justice. Article 39(b) is a crucial part of the Indian Constitution, representing a cornerstone of the directive principles of state policy. It reflects the vision of the Constitution's framers to create a just and equitable society, aiming to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. This article is not legally enforceable in a court of law, meaning it cannot be the basis for a legal claim. However, it lays down guidelines for the government to create policies that promote the welfare of the people. These policies aim to reduce economic disparities and ensure social welfare, focusing on the equitable distribution of resources. The current debate hinges on the interpretation of material resources of the community, a phrase that has sparked significant legal and political discourse. Does this phrase encompass private property, or is it limited to public assets? This question is central to the ongoing discussions. The petitioners argue that the term should be interpreted broadly to include a wide range of resources. They believe it should include private land, industries, and other forms of wealth, thereby allowing for more comprehensive economic reforms. Conversely, the respondents argue for a narrower interpretation, suggesting a more limited scope. They contend that material resources refer only to resources owned by the state, such as public lands and state enterprises. This difference in interpretation is at the core of the legal battle, influencing the potential outcomes of the case. If the court rules in favor of a broader interpretation, it could pave the way for significant changes in land ownership, resource allocation, and economic policies, potentially transforming the economic landscape. A narrower interpretation, however, would likely maintain the status quo and limit the government's ability to pursue redistributive policies, keeping the current economic structures largely intact. The directive. Principles of state policy are a unique feature of the Indian Constitution, setting it apart from many other constitutions around the world. These principles embody the aspirations of a nation striving for social justice and economic equality, aiming to uplift every citizen regardless of their background. They reflect a commitment to creating a society where everyone has a fair chance to thrive, ensuring that opportunities are not limited by one's socio-economic status. Unlike fundamental rights, which are enforceable by law, the directive principles are guidelines for the state to follow when formulating policies, serving as a moral compass for governance. They cover a wide range of issues, including education, health, labor rights, environmental protection, and economic justice, addressing the multifaceted needs of a diverse population. The inclusion of Article 39(b) within the directive principles highlights the importance given by the Constitution's framers to equitable distribution of resources, ensuring that wealth does not remain concentrated in a few hands. They recognized that true freedom could not be achieved without addressing the root causes of poverty and inequality, which have long plagued the nation. The directive principles represent a social contract between the state and its citizens, a promise that the government will strive to create a just and equitable society. They reflect a vision of India, where the government actively works towards the welfare of all its people, ensuring that the benefits of economic growth reach every section of society, from urban centers to rural villages. The Supreme Court's interpretation of Article 39(b) will determine how far the state can go in fulfilling this promise of social justice, shaping the future of India's socio-economic landscape. The tension between private property rights and public welfare objectives is not new. It has been a recurring theme throughout history, from ancient land reforms to modern-day debates on taxation and social welfare programs. Societies have grappled with the question of how to balance individual rights with the needs of the community. In the Indian context, this debate gained prominence during the early years after independence. The newly formed nation faced the daunting task of uplifting millions from poverty and underdevelopment. The government, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, embarked on an ambitious program of industrialization and social reform. This involved land reforms, nationalization of key industries, and the implementation of various welfare schemes. These measures, while aimed at achieving social justice, often clashed with the interests of landowners and industrialists. The debate over the right to property became a defining feature of Indian politics, leading to numerous legal challenges and constitutional amendments. The current case before the Supreme Court is the latest chapter in this ongoing and complex saga.